The Thornton estate loomed like a cathedral of wealth against the rolling hills of upstate New York, its gabled roofs catching the golden light of a 1925 autumn evening. Inside the drawing room gleamed with excess crystal chandeliers cast rainbows on mahogany walls, and Persian rugs muffled the footsteps of servants gliding past with silver trays. The air smelled of polished wood and Richard Thornton's cigar, a bitter tang that clung to the velvet drapes. Emily Carter stood in a shadowed corner, her faded cotton dress a hand-me-down from her rural childhood clashing with the room's opulence. She clutched her hands, nails digging into her palms as James Thornton, the family's golden heir, faced his parents with a fire in his eyes that she both loathed and envied. James, 22 and dashing in a tailored pinstripe suit, stood at the room's center, his voice ringing like a preacher's sermon. "I won't marry Emily," he declared, his jaw set. "I love Sophia Bennett. She's not some docile bride you picked to chain me to this estate. We're going to Europe, Paris, London, the heart of new ideas. We'll study, learn, and build a future that isn't bound by your outdated traditions." His words sliced through the room, each a rebellion against the Thornton legacy built on Wall Street fortunes and old money pride. Emily's heart thudded, not with hurt, but with a cold, familiar rage. She'd heard this speech before in another life. Richard Thornton, a former titan of finance whose sharp features had softened into weathered lines after the market tremors of 1920, slammed his fist on the arm of his leather chair. "You're the heir, James. This family's name rests on you. Duty isn't a choice. It's blood." His cigar trembled, ash scattering on the rug. Margaret Thornton, seated beside him in a high-necked gown, pressed a handkerchief to her eyes, her voice soft but pleading. "We raised you for this, James. For the Thorntons, for the estate. Emily's been like a daughter to us. She understands sacrifice." Her gaze flicked to Emily, heavy with expectation. Emily kept her eyes down, her plain dress starkly contrasting to Sophia's shimmering flapper gown, all beads and fringe catching the light as she stood beside James. Sophia, a college girl with bobbed hair and a sharp tongue, clutched James's arm, her lips pursed in quiet defiance. Emily's faded yellow cotton patched at the hem made her feel small out of place, like a ghost from a bygone era. But she wasn't the naive ward of her past life, the girl who'd been betrothed to James at 16, used and discarded. In that life, James had taken her to his bed, called her filthy, and fled with Sophia to Europe, leaving her pregnant and bound to the Thornton estate. She'd toiled through the Great Depression, sending him money while serving his parents, only to be accused of infidelity when he returned in 1945, flush with foreign wealth. He'd branded her a harlot, had her cast out, and she died alone, her name smeared. This time, reborn with memories of that betrayal, Emily would rewrite her fate. She stepped forward, her voice soft but clear like a bell cutting through the storm. "I respect James's love for Sophia," she said, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment. "I only want what's best for the family." The words were a lie sweet as honey, and they worked. Richard's shoulders eased slightly, though his scowl remained. Margaret dabbed her tears, murmuring, "Good girl." James's gaze lingered on Emily, a flicker of guilt in his blue eyes, but Sophia's grip tightened, pulling him back. Emily's lips twitched. She'd planted the first seed of doubt. Richard exhaled, smoke curling. "You want to chase dreams, fine, but you'll marry Emily first and give us an heir. The Thornton name won't die because of your whims." His voice was steel, a reminder of the man who'd once brokered million-dollar deals. James laughed, sharp and bitter. "Marry her never. Sophia's my only wife. I don't want your estate or your title. Let someone else have it." He turned to Sophia, who nodded, her smile tight but triumphant. Emily's chest tightened, not with love, but with the weight of her past. James's words had charmed her in her previous life, only to mask his cowardice. He'd indulged in her body while preaching fidelity to Sophia, then fled, leaving her to bear his child and his parents' burdens. Margaret's voice broke the silence, trembling. "James, please. Europe's so far. Who knows when you'll return? Emily's been with us since she was a girl raised in this house. She'll stay care for us while you pursue your future." Her words were a plea, but they stung Emily like a slap. They hadn't asked her if she wanted this role, this sacrifice. In her past life, she'd nodded, desperate for approval, only to be crushed by their indifference. Now she saw their hypocrisy. James and Sophia's modern ideals were just a prettier cage passing their responsibilities to her. Emily lowered her head, letting a single tear fall, calculated and perfect. "I don't understand your kind of love, James," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "but I respect it. I'll do what the family needs." The room stilled. Richard's cigar paused midair. Margaret's handkerchief froze. James's guilt deepened, his brow furrowing. Sophia's eyes narrowed, sensing a rival she couldn't name. Emily's tear wasn't for them, it was for the girl she'd been and the vengeance she'd claim. As the family dispersed, Emily lingered by the drawing room's gramophone, its needle scratching softly. She imagined sharing this tale with others, a story of betrayal and rebirth that deserved to be heard. If you're captivated by this drama, dear listener, give this tale a thumbs up, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to join Emily's journey. The Thornton estate's secrets are just beginning to unravel, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The Thornton estate's parlor was dim the following evening, lit only by a few flickering lamps that cast long shadows across the oak-paneled walls. The air was heavy with the scent of Margaret's lavender perfume, and the faint bitterness of Richard's whiskey poured from a crystal decanter that hadn't left his side since the Wall Street tremors of 1920. Emily Carter stood near the fireplace, her patched cotton dress blending into the gloom, her hands folded demurely as she listened to the Thorntons' heated debate. The fire's glow illuminated James Thornton and Sophia Bennett, seated on a velvet settee, their modern attire, his pinstripe suit, her beaded flapper dress starkly contrasting to Emily's simplicity. Outside, the wind carried whispers of economic unrest, breadlines forming in distant cities, a prelude to the Great Depression Emily knew was coming. Richard paced his heavy footsteps, thudding on the hardwood floor. "You think you can walk away, James?" he growled, his voice rough from years of shouting over trading floors. "The Thornton name is a legacy built on steel and stocks, not some college boy's dreams of Paris cafes. The markets are shaky, Europe's a powder keg. You owe this family an heir before you go gallivanting off." His eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights fixed on James, who leaned back defiant, one arm around Sophia. Margaret sat in an armchair, her face pale, clutching a rosary. "We've given you everything, James," she said softly, "this estate, this life. Emily's been raised here like our own. She'll stay, keep things steady while you're gone." Emily's heart twisted, not with affection, but with the sharp clarity of her past life. She remembered this moment, Richard's demands, Margaret's tears, James's reckless promises. In that life she'd been 16, a ward of the Thorntons since her parents' death, betrothed to James in a deal that felt more like a transaction. He'd used her whispering sweet lies while planning his escape with Sophia. When she bore his child, he and Sophia sailed away demanding money every month. Emily had slaved through the Depression, serving Richard and Margaret, only to be cast out when James returned, his pockets lined with foreign wealth. He'd accused her of infidelity, rallied the town against her, and she'd died disgraced, her name erased. Now reborn with those memories, Emily saw their words for what they were, a trap dressed in duty. James scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "An heir. With Emily, I love Sophia. She's my future, not some arranged bride from your Gilded Age playbook." Sophia squeezed his hand, her bobbed hair catching the lamplight. "We're building something new, Mr. Thornton," she said, her tone polished from college debates. "We reject old traditions, arranged marriages, outdated roles, but we understand family." Her eyes flicked to Emily, sharp with calculation. "Emily can stay and manage the estate. It's what she's good for." The words were a knife, subtle but profound. Emily's face remained serene, but inside she burned. Sophia's progressive ideals were a facade bending when it suited her. Sophia had orchestrated Emily's ruin in her past life, ensuring James's loyalty by painting her as a threat. Emily stepped closer to the fire, its warmth doing little to thaw the ice in her chest. "I don't want to stand in the way of your love," she said, her voice trembling enough to seem sincere. "I'll do what's needed for the Thorntons. I've always seen this as my home." Margaret's face softened, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You're a good girl, Emily," she murmured. Richard grunted, setting his whiskey down. Then it settled. "James, you marry Emily and give us a child before you leave. Otherwise you're cut off, no funds, no estate." His tone left no room for argument, a reminder of the man who'd once stared down robber barons. James's face reddened, his fists clenching. "You can't force me. I'd rather give up everything than marry her." He turned to Sophia, his voice softening. "I'm sorry, darling. I know this is hard." Sophia nodded, her lips tight, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Emily caught it. Sophia feared her even now. In her past life, Emily had begged for James's love, only to be crushed by his betrayal. Now she'd use their guilt as a weapon. "I don't understand your kind of love," she said, looking at James, her eyes glistening. "But I respect it. I'll stay and care for Mr. and Mrs. Thornton so that you can chase your dreams." The words were a performance honed by memories of pain. James's guilt deepened, his shoulders slumping. Sophia's grip on his arm tightened, her smile forced. Richard exhaled the fight draining from him. "Fine. Marry her, secure the line, then go. But don't expect a dime until it's done." He poured another whiskey, the glass shaking slightly. Margaret reached for Emily's hand, her touch cold. "You're our anchor, dear," she said. Emily nodded, her mind racing. She'd been their pawn, used and discarded in her past life. Now she'd turn their demands against them, starting with James and Sophia's fragile bond. The parlor's lamps flickered, casting their faces in half-light as Emily planned her next move. The Great Depression loomed, and she'd be ready not just to survive, but to win. The Thornton Estate's library was a sanctuary of leather-bound books and polished oak, its tall windows framing the gray dusk of a late 1925 evening in upstate New York. The air carried the faint must of old pages and the sharp tang of Sophia Bennett's rosewater perfume, a modern scent that clashed with the room's Gilded Age grandeur. Emily Carter stood by a bookshelf, her faded cotton dress a quiet rebuke to Sophia's shimmering flapper gown, its beads catching the glow of a brass lamp. James Thornton paced near the fireplace, his pinstripe suit rumpled from a week of arguments with his parents, Richard and Margaret. The ultimatum hung heavy: marry Emily and produce an heir or lose the Thornton fortune. Emily's heart beat steadily, her reborn memories a map to navigate this moment. She'd been a pawn in their games in her past life, but now she'd turn their moves against them. Sophia perched on a velvet chaise, her bobbed hair sharp as a blade, her voice measured but laced with venom. "James, we can't let your parents chain us to their old world rules," she said, glancing at Emily. "The heir doesn't need to be hers. There's Clara, that maid, sturdy, plain, perfect for childbearing. No title, no complications." Her words were a calculated strike meant to sideline Emily while preserving Sophia's claim on James. Clara, a broad-hipped girl who scrubbed floors in silence, was an easy pawn, unseen expendable. Emily's lips twitched, but she kept her face soft, almost fragile. Sophia's jealousy was a crack she could pry open. Sophia had orchestrated Emily's ruin in her past life, spreading whispers that painted her as a threat to James's love. Now Emily saw the same fear in Sophia's eyes, a dread that James might waver. James stopped pacing, his face twisting. A maid. "That's beneath me, Sophia." His voice cracked with indignation, but his eyes flicked to Emily, guilt flickering like a faulty bulb. He'd grown up with her shared childhood games under the estate's oaks, yet he'd cast her aside for Sophia's modern allure. Emily remembered his past life hypocrisy, bedding her while preaching fidelity, then fleeing when she bore his child. She stepped forward, her voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. "I don't want to ruin your love, James," she said, her eyes meeting his. "If Claire's the answer, I'll support it. I'll stay manage the household and care for Mr. and Mrs. Thornton." Her words were a velvet trap amplifying James's guilt, while exposing Sophia's selfishness. Sophia's smile faltered, her fingers tightening on her beaded clutch. "You're so noble, Emily," she said, the word dripping with sarcasm. "But let's be practical. Claire's a nobody. She'll have the child, we'll pay her off, and James and I can leave for Europe without this hanging over us." Her tone was brisk, like a college debate champion closing an argument, but her eyes betrayed unease. Emily's compliance unnerved her. She'd expected tears, not quiet resolve. In her past life, Emily's outbursts had made Sophia's manipulations easier, painting Emily as the hysterical ward against Sophia's poised modernity. Emily's calm was a weapon, forcing Sophia to push harder. James rubbed his temples, caught between his parents' demands and Sophia's plan. "This feels wrong," he muttered, glancing at Emily. "You've been part of this family forever. To use you like this." Emily cut him off, her voice soft but firm. "It's not about me, James. It's about your future with Sophia. I'll do what's needed to keep the Thorntons whole." Her eyes glistened, a calculated tear catching the lamplight. James's shoulders slumped, his resistance crumbling. Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. She'd won, but Emily's performance stole the spotlight. Richard, entering with a whiskey glass, nodded gruffly. "Clara, it is then. Get it done, James, and you can go." Margaret, trailing behind, clutched her rosary, her eyes red. "Emily, you're a blessing," she whispered. Emily bowed her head, hiding a smirk. The first piece of her revenge was in place. The library's clock ticked, marking the slow unraveling of James and Sophia's dreams. Outside, the wind carried rumors of failing banks and restless workers, a faint echo of the Great Depression Emily knew loomed. She'd used their greed and pride to dismantle them, just as they'd dismantled her in another life. Clara, polishing silver in the hall, had no idea she'd be the next pawn to fall. The Thornton estate's guest room was a sterile contrast to its lavish halls, plain walls, and single bed, a stark stage for an awkward ritual. It was early 1926, and the air outside carried the chill of a New York winter frost glazing the estate's windows. Inside, Emily Carter sat in the parlor, her patched cotton dress folded neatly as she sipped tea across from Sophia Bennett, whose flapper gown seemed out of place in the morning light. James Thornton had fulfilled his parents' demand for 2 weeks, spending 30 minutes daily with Clara, the maid chosen to bear his child. The arrangement was clinical and humiliating, and Emily orchestrated its tension like a conductor, her reborn memories guiding every move. In her past life, Clara's betrayal, spreading lies that Emily stole the Thornton fortune, had led to her disgrace and death. Now Emily would ensure Clara's role ended differently. Each morning, James emerged from the guest room, his face flushed, his tie askew. Clara, broad-shouldered and silent, slipped back to her duties, her eyes avoiding the household's whispers. Sitting in the parlor, Emily and Sophia filled the silence with veiled barbs. Sophia said, "You're playing the saint so well," stirring her tea with a clink. "Hoping James pities you, he's mine, Emily." Her voice was sharp-honed by college debates, but her fingers trembled slightly. Emily dabbed her eyes, the gesture practiced. "I want you both happy," she said softly. "I'll care for the household while you're gone." Sophia's smile was grim. She sensed Emily's game, but couldn't name it. Sophia had thrived on Emily's outbursts in her past life, using them to paint her as unstable. Emily's quiet strength was now a mirror reflecting Sophia's hypocrisy. The parlor's gramophone played a faint jazz tune, its notes clashing with the estate's old-money stiffness. Outside, newsboys shouted headlines of rising unemployment, a prelude to the economic storm Emily knew would hit by 1929. She'd prepared studying ledgers late at night, recalling how the Great Depression had crushed families like the Thorntons. James, meanwhile, was trapped in his own making, his progressive ideals crumbling under duty. "This is torture," he muttered one morning, joining them in the parlor. "Clara's fine, but it's not right." Emily tilted her head, her voice gentle. "You're doing this for Sophia, for your future. I'll make sure everything here is safe." James's eyes softened, guilt flickering. Sophia's cup rattled in its saucer. She hated sharing even a sliver of his heart. A week later, the doctor arrived, his black bag heavy with instruments. In the dining room, Clara sat, her face pale, as he pressed a stethoscope to her abdomen. "She's pregnant," he announced, adjusting his glasses. Richard, puffing a cigar, clapped James's shoulder. "Good work, son. Now you can go." Margaret, clutching her rosary, smiled faintly. "The Thornton line's secure." Emily bowed her head, hiding her satisfaction. Clara's role was set, and her downfall would come later. For now, the focus shifted to the docks. The New York harbor was a chaos of steamships and shouting porters, the air thick with coal smoke and salt. James and Sophia stood on the pier, their trunks piled, high tickets to Paris clutched in gloved hands. Sophia's white coat gleamed, a wedding gown in all but name, while James's suit was crisp, his face torn between relief and regret. The household gathered to see them off, Richard stern, Margaret tearful, servants murmuring. Emily stood apart, her plain dress swaying in the wind. "Thank you, Emily," James said, his voice low, his hand brushing hers. Sophia tugged him toward the gangplank, her eyes flashing. "We'll write," she called, her tone brittle. Emily waved her smile, serene but cold. In her past life, this moment had broken her. She'd begged James to stay, only to be left with his child and his parents' demands. Now she watched the ship vanish, knowing their dreams would curdle abroad. Emily sat in the library at the estate, the silence heavy with possibility. Clara, now pregnant, polished silver nearby, unaware of her role in Emily's revenge. The world outside was shifting factories, slowing banks, whispering of trouble. Emily's past life knowledge was her weapon. She'd protect the household, hoard resources, and let James and Sophia's selfishness consume them. The game was far from over, and she held all the cards. The Thornton estate stood like a fading monument in the crisp autumn of 1926, its manicured lawns yellowing under the weight of a restless economy. Inside, the grand halls echoed with the clink of silver and the soft tread of servants, but the air was thick with unease. News of factory slowdowns and bank wobbles drifted from radio broadcasts. Emily Carter, now the de facto steward of the household, sat at a heavy oak desk in the study, her patched cotton dress a quiet contrast to the room's gilded opulence. Ledgers sprawled before her, their numbers a map of the Thornton fortune teetering as Wall Street's tremors grew louder. Her reborn memories burned bright. The Great Depression would strike by 1929, plunging families like the Thorntons into ruin. She'd use that knowledge to secure the estate and exact her revenge. Clara, the broad-hipped maid now carrying James Thornton's child, moved sluggishly through the dining room polishing a chandelier. Her plain face glowed with a smug pride, her apron straining over her growing belly. "Miss Emily," she said, pausing to rest a hand on her hip. "Shouldn't I have a better room now? The air deserves it." Her tone was bold, testing boundaries. Emily smiled, her expression warm, but her eyes cold. "Of course, Clara. You'll have the guest suite and all the comforts you need." In her past life, Clara had betrayed her, spreading lies that Emily stole the Thornton wealth, leading to her disgrace and death. Emily would turn Clara's greed against her, ensuring a fall as calculated as it was cruel. She ordered the cook to prepare lavish meals for Clara: roast beef dripping with fat, creamy potato soups, cakes layered with frosting. Each day, Clara ate greedily, her cheeks flushing as she demanded seconds. "The baby needs strength," she'd say, her voice thick with entitlement. Emily nodded, her heart a steel vault. Her past life knowledge included the dangers of overconsumption during pregnancy, high blood pressure, difficult labor. 1926 medical care was rudimentary, and Clara's excess would be her undoing. Emily recalled the maid's past betrayal, whispering to servants that Emily planned to flee with the family's gold, turning the household against her. When James returned in 1945, Clara's lies had sealed Emily's fate, branding her a thief and harlot. This time, Emily would ensure Clara paid first. Beyond the estate, the world was shifting. Radio reports spoke of breadlines in Chicago and strikes in Pittsburgh. Emily pored over newspapers, her reborn memory guiding the coming crash. She'd seen the Dust Bowl's devastation, families starving as banks foreclosed. The Thorntons' wealth Goldstock's land was vulnerable, but Emily was not. She began diverting funds, selling minor assets like antique vases to buy grain, storing it in barns on the estate's outskirts. For lean times, she told the steward, Ethan, a lanky man who trusted her implicitly. He nodded, unaware of her deeper plan. She'd sent every penny to James and Sophia abroad in her past life, only to be abandoned. Now she'd hoard resources not for them, but for survival. Clara's demands grew bolder. "I need a maid of my own," she said one evening, lounging in her new suite, her fingers sticky with jam. Emily inclined her head. "Anything for the air," she said, her voice syrupy. She assigned a young servant to Clara, ensuring the maid reported every move. Clara's greed mirrors James's hypocrisy. Both took what they wanted, leaving others to clean up. Emily's nights were spent in the study, balancing ledgers and plotting. She remembered the Thornton estate crumbling in her past life, servants, unpaid Richard and Margaret, broken by James's neglect. This time she'd keep the household intact, her control absolute. The estate's clock tower chimed midnight, its toll a reminder of time's weight. Clara slept soundly, her belly swelling with each indulgent meal. Emily closed the ledger, her fingers tracing the numbers. The Thorntons thought her a dutiful ward, but she was a general marshalling resources for a war only she foresaw. Clara's smug smile, James's distant promises, and Sophia's sharp barbs would unravel under her hand. The world outside grew darker, but Emily's path was clear, lit by the fire of her past life's pain. The Thornton estate's birthing room was a makeshift haven of white sheets and antiseptics in the sweltering summer of 1927. Outside upstate New York, baked under a relentless sun, the fields brittle as rumors of drought spread early whispers of the Dust Bowl that Emily Carter knew would ravage the nation. Inside, Clara's screams tore through the air, raw and ragged, as she labored to deliver James Thornton's child. The room smelled of sweat and fear, the doctor's brow slick as he barked orders to two midwives. Emily stood by the door, her cotton dress pristine, her face a mask of concern. Her reborn memories guided her. Clara's overfed pregnancy, fueled by Emily's calculated indulgence, had led to this moment. In her past life, Clara's betrayal had cost Emily her life. Now justice was unfolding sharp as a scalpel. Clara's labor had begun 3 days ago, each hour stretching her endurance thinner. Her belly swollen from months of rich meals, fatty roasts, creamy soups, endless desserts, was a grotesque map of stretch marks hidden beneath her sweat-soaked gown. The doctor, a gray-haired man with trembling hands, muttered about complications. "The baby's too large," he said, wiping his glasses. "Her pressure's too high." The midwives exhausted sponged Clara's forehead, their faces pale. Richard Thornton stood outside puffing a cigar while Margaret clutched her rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. The air, she whispered. It must survive. Emily nodded, her voice soft. It will, Mrs. Thornton. Her heart was cold. Clara's fate was sealed. Clara had been a quiet menace in her past life, spreading lies that Emily planned to flee with the Thornton fortune. Those rumors turned the household against her, paving the way for James's return and Emily's disgrace. She'd been cast out, accused of theft and infidelity, her body broken by the time she died. Now Emily had turned Clara's greed into a trap. Months of lavish meals had pushed Clara's body beyond its limits, her pregnancy a ticking bomb. Medical care in 1927 was a gamble. Hospitals were few and rural doctors lacked the tools for complex cases. Emily had counted on that. Her kindness was a poison. The doctor's voice cut through Clara's screams. "We need a C-section. It's the only way." Richard, overhearing, stormed in. "Please do it. Save the child." Margaret gasped, clutching Emily's arm. "It's so risky," she whispered. Emily squeezed her hand, her face solemn. "It's for the Thornton line." The doctor prepared a crude operating table, his tools glinting under a single bulb. Clara, delirious, moaned, "I'm to be a mistress," the young master promised. Her words faded as the ether took hold. The midwives held her down. The blade flashed and blood seeped onto the sheets. The baby, a boy, heavy and red, emerged crying, but Clara's breath stilled. The doctor shook his head. "She's gone." Margaret cradled the infant, tears streaming as she named him Thomas. Richard exhaled, his cigar ash falling. "Bury her quietly," he said, handing a roll of bills to the doctor. "Send silver to her family." The midwives wrapped Clara's body, their faces blank. Emily bowed her head, hiding the triumph in her eyes. Clara's death was justice, a mirror of the betrayal she'd inflicted in another life. The household mourned briefly, but Thomas's cries filled the void the Thornton line secured. Emily vowed to raise him as her own, cementing her place as the estate's heart. Outside, the summer heat pressed down, a warning of harder years ahead. Newspapers piled on Emily's desk spoke of crop failures, bank runs, omens of the Great Depression she'd foreseen. She'd protected the household, stockpiling grain in hidden barns, but her work was far from done. James and Sophia, sailing toward Europe's false promises, would face their own reckoning. Emily stepped into the nursery, Thomas's tiny hand in hers, her resolve a quiet flame. Clara was gone, but the game was still hers to win. The Thornton estate's dining room was a hollow shell in the bitter winter of 1929, its once gleaming chandeliers dulled by dust, the long oak table bare except for a flickering oil lamp. Outside, upstate New York shivered under a gray sky, the wind carrying the distant wail of factory whistles shutting down. The Great Depression had crashed over America like a tidal wave, bank failures and breadlines swallowing the nation's hope. Emily Carter sat at the table's head, her patched cotton dress contrasting with the faded opulence around her. Before her lay a stack of letters from James Thornton sent from Paris, each a plea for money. Her reborn memories burned with clarity. In her past life, she'd sent every penny to James and Sophia Bennett, only to be betrayed when they returned accusing her of theft. Now she'd used their greed to turn his parents, Richard and Margaret, against him. Richard slumped in a chair, his once sharp suit hanging loose on a frame thinned by worry and whiskey. His cigar, a cheap substitute for his old Havanas, smoldered in an ashtray. Frail in a worn shawl, Margaret clutched a rosary, her eyes red from sleepless nights. The household teetered on ruined servants, unpaid coal rations low. Emily unfolded James's latest letter, her voice steady as she read aloud. "Coffee's $5 a cup here, Father. Bread and wine are worse. Sophia and I need funds for books rent and train fares. Please send more." She skipped the parts where James asked after their health or mentioned his studies, her tone flat, emphasizing his demands. Richard's face darkened, his fist clenching. "All he cares about is money," he roared, slamming the table. "Does he even remember he has a son?" Margaret's lips trembled. "He's our boy Richard. Without funds, they'll starve in Paris." She slid a pearl necklace across the table, its luster dulled by time. "Sell this, Emily. Please send it to him." Emily took the necklace, her fingers brushing the fabulous beads, but her eyes were cold. In her past life, she'd emptied the Thornton vaults for James only to be cast out when he returned. Now she'd hoard their wealth not for him but for survival. "I'll see to it," she said softly, pocketing the pearls. Later, she added them to a hidden safe in the estate's attic, already brimming with gold watches, rings, and cash valuables she'd never send abroad. The radio in the corner crackled, reporting stock market losses and Hoovervilles sprouting across cities. Emily's reborn knowledge was her edge. She'd seen the Depression's toll families' starving farms foreclosed. She'd begun trading heirlooms for grain and canned goods, storing them in barns outside town. Ethan the steward helped without question, his loyalty forged by years of Emily's quiet leadership. He reported that the barns are nearly complete and his breath is visible in the attic's chill, enough to feed us for years. Emily nodded, her mind on the future war would follow the Depression, and she'd be ready. James's letters had drained the estate in her past life, leaving her to beg for scraps. Now she read only his greed aloud, sowing discord with surgical precision. Richard's health was fading, his coughs echoing through the halls. Margaret's migraines worsened, and her rosary beads wore smoothly. Emily brought Thomas James's infant son to their rooms nightly, his giggles a fleeting balm. "James never asks about him," she said softly, cradling the boy. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "We raised him for nothing," she whispered. Richard grunted, his voice hoarse. "That boy's no son of mine." Emily's heart stirred, not with pity but with triumph. She remembered their indifference in her past life, casting her out when James accused her of infidelity. Now she'd turned their love for him to ash, securing her grip on the household. The lamp flickered, casting shadows like ghosts of the Thorntons' past. Emily folded the letter, her plan unfolding with the precision of a clock. The Thornton estate's study was a fortress of shadows in the spring of 1931, its heavy curtains blocking the weak sunlight of a world gripped by the Great Depression. Upstate New York lay under a pall of dust, the fields barren as the Dust Bowl's first winds swept in from the Midwest. Emily Carter sat at the desk, her cotton dress patched but clean, her hand steady as she forged a document in Richard Thornton's scrawl. Once a beacon of wealth, the estate was now a liability. Creditors circled, taxes loomed, and the household's coffers were nearly empty. Her reborn memories were a lighthouse. She'd seen the estate sold in her past life, its wealth squandered by James and Sophia. This time she'd sell it herself, converting its value to grain and supplies for the war she knew was coming. The document was a deed transfer disguised as a bank remittance slip. Emily had studied Richard's signature for months, practicing its loops on scraps of paper. She'd learned the bank's new regulations tightened since the 1929 crash, requiring detailed forms to secure transactions. Supplementary clauses, she'd told Richard, presenting the paper. He'd been drunk, his eyes glazed from whiskey, a cheap bottle replacing his old decanters. "What's this?" he mumbled, his cigar long gone, replaced by a cigarette's acrid smoke. "Bank rules, sir," Emily said, her voice calm. "To send money to James. The economy's tight extra signatures protect us." Richard rubbed his temples, waving her off. "Sign it and send the damn money. When's that boy coming back?" He scrawled his name, the ink smudging. Emily's heart thrummed. She held the estate's fate. She left the estate through a back gate, her coat shielding her from prying eyes. In a Manhattan tea house, its tables scarred from hard times, she met Mr. Caldwell, a businessman with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. The city buzzed with desperation. Men in tattered hats sold apples on corners, their faces gaunt. Emily handed Caldwell the deed, its pages crisp. He scanned it, checking Richard's signature against a ledger. "Everything's in order," he said, sliding a thick stack of silver notes across the table. Emily counted them, her fingers steady, $10,000, enough to buy a fortune in grain. Caldwell warned that these notes won't hold value long, adjusting his tie, wars brewing in Europe. Trade them fast. Emily nodded, her mind already on the grain shop. She'd seen silver notes turn to dust in her past life as war rationing took hold. She'd be ready. At a Brooklyn warehouse, Emily exchanged the notes for sacks of rice flour and canned beans, the air thick with the scent of burlap and dust. Ethan and a few loyal servants hauled the supplies to barns outside town, their trucks rattling over rutted roads. "This'll feed hundreds," Ethan said, wiping sweat from his brow. Emily's eyes were distant, recalling the war years, ration cards, empty shelves, soldiers starving. "It's not enough," she replied, her voice low. "Not for what's coming." Ethan frowned, but didn't argue. He'd seen her foresight save the household from tax collectors trusting her implicitly. In her past life, the estate's sale had enriched James, leaving her to beg. Now she'd turned its bricks into survival, Richard raged over missing funds back at the estate, and his cough was worse. "Where's the money for coal?" he bellowed, unaware of the deed's transfer. Emily soothed him, her voice soft. "The banks are slow, sir. I'll handle it." Margaret, bedridden, clutched Thomas's tiny hand, her face etched with worry. "James needs us," she whispered. Emily nodded, hiding her satisfaction. The barns overflowed, the household was hers, and James's letters would soon go unanswered. Outside, dust clouds rolled in a harbinger of war and want. Emily closed the study door, the deed's secret safe in her heart, her revenge a step closer to fruition. The Thornton estate was a ghost of its former glory in the summer of 1932, its grand halls stripped of silver and tapestries sold to pay mounting debts. Outside upstate New York wilted under the Great Depression's chokehold with dust storms from the Midwest, painting the sky a sickly brown. Emily Carter moved through the empty dining room, her patched cotton dress a quiet defiance against the decay. The air smelled of stale whiskey and despair, a far cry from the estate's old opulence. Richard Thornton's shouts echoed from the parlor, demanding more liquor, while Margaret's migraines kept her bedridden, her rosary idle. Emily's reborn memories guided her in her past life. She'd slaved for the Thorntons, sending money to James and Sophia abroad only to be cast out. Now she'd use Richard and Margaret's weaknesses to seize complete control, her revenge a slow poison. Richard's health had crumbled, his once robust frame gaunt from endless drinking. The depression had gutted his investments, leaving the household reliant on Emily's hidden grain stores. "Where's the money for bourbon?" he bellowed, his voice hoarse as he clutched a near-empty bottle. Emily stood before him, her face calm. "The banks froze our accounts, sir. We've only grain left." It was a half-truth. She'd diverted funds to barns outside town, preparing for the war she knew loomed. Richard didn't believe her, his bloodshot eyes narrowing. "The estate is worth millions." "Sell something." Emily nodded, slipping a jade bracelet from her wrist. "I'll arrange a place where you and Mrs. Thornton can rest," she said, her voice soft but deliberate. She sent Ethan, the loyal steward, to a Manhattan speakeasy, its neon sign flickering in a grimy alley. The city was a skeleton of its roaring 20s. Self-men in tattered coats begged on corners, their faces etched with hunger. Emily traded the bracelet for a private suite, its velvet chairs and jazz records a false oasis. She escorted Richard and Margaret in a rattling sedan, the ride silent save for Richard's coughs. The speakeasy owner, a slick man named Vito, poured bourbon generously, his flattery thick. "Mr. Thornton, a legend like you deserves comfort," he crooned. Richard grinned, his pride stirred and downed a glass. Margaret hesitant sipped to ease her migraines, her fear of addiction dulled by desperation. "It helps," she murmured, her eyes glazing. Within weeks, the speakeasy became their prison. Richard's drinking spiraled, his days a blur of whiskey and jazz. Margaret, once resistant, joined him, her migraines a convenient excuse. Emily visited weekly, reading James's letters, carefully edited to highlight his money pleas. "We need funds for rent, Father," she read, skipping his hollow concern. Richard's face reddened. "Ungrateful boy," Margaret sighed, handing over a gold locket. "Sell it, Emily. He's all we have." Emily pocketed it, adding it to her hidden safe. In her past life, their blind devotion to James had crushed her, casting her out when he accused her of theft. Now she fed their addiction, draining their will. By 1933, Richard's liver failed, his body collapsing in the speakeasy's haze. Margaret followed weeks later, her heart weakened by liquor and grief. Vito demanded payment for their debts. "Not mine," Emily said coolly, her eyes meeting his. "They died here, handle it." Vito sneered, threatening to dump their bodies in the Hudson. Emily shrugged. "Do what you must." She walked out, the jazz fading behind her. The Thorntons were gone, the estate hers. Outside, Hooverville sprawled and war rumors grew louder. Emily clutched Thomas's hand, the boy her anchor. Her revenge had claimed its first major victims, but James and Sophia remained their reckoning, delayed but certain. The fields outside upstate New York were barren in the winter of 1939, their soil choked by dust as the Great Depression lingered like a wound. Emily Carter stood in a barn, its rafters sagging under sacks of grain and canned goods, her hoard from years of selling Thornton heirlooms. The air smelled of burlap and rust, a stark contrast to the estate's faded grandeur, now a hollow shell she'd sold in 1931. Her patched cotton dress was worn but clean, her face lined with resolve. Her reborn memories burned World War II had begun in Europe, and Pearl Harbor would soon drag America into its maw. In her past life, she'd toiled through war's rationing, abandoned by James and Sophia, only to die disgraced. Now she'd turn her foresight into salvation, joining a greater cause while her revenge simmered. Emily rallied the household, over 100 servants, gardeners, and maids united by her leadership. She told them, "We've enough food to share," her voice steady. "The army needs it more." She donated half her grain to local recruiters, feeding soldiers training for Europe. The act won her allies, including Anna, a sharp-eyed maid who'd read Marxist pamphlets with her. "You're doing right, Miss Emily," Anna said, hauling sacks. Emily nodded, her heart heavy. She remembered the war's toll ration cards, blackouts, bodies piling up. She'd save who she could. In her past life, the household had fractured, betrayed by lies she'd later traced to Clara. Now she'd forged them into comrades. In 1941, after Pearl Harbor's shock, Emily enlisted in the Women's Army Corps, leaving Thomas with a trusted nursemaid. She trained in Virginia, her fingers flying over typewriters, dispatching orders for D-Day preparations. Her reborn knowledge guided her memories of Normandy's blood rationing's bite. She worked alongside Anna, whose quick wit hid a fierce heart. They aided refugees and bandaged soldiers and recorded the names of the fallen in a leather notebook Emily carried. For their families, she told Anna, her voice catching. Each name Ethan killed in Normandy. Countless others haunted her dreams, their faces blending with her past life pain. She'd been cast out, then accused of theft by James. Now she fought for a new America, her revenge a quiet undercurrent. By 1945, victory swept Europe, and Emily returned to a modest D.C. courtyard home awarded for her service. The city buzzed with VJ Day celebrations, but her heart was empty, scarred by war's losses. Armless but alive, Anna visited often, and her laugh was a rare light. "We made it, Emily," she said, sipping tea. Emily forced a smile, her insomnia relentless. Her notebook filled with heroes' names sat heavy on her desk. She'd vowed to return their gravestones home, a debt to the fallen. In her past life, she'd died before seeing peace. Now she stood on its edge, but James and Sophia's betrayal loomed unfinished. One evening, a letter arrived, not from James, but a WAC comrade mentioning Sophia. During the war, Emily met her in a broken but defiant field hospital. Sophia had escaped James's abuse, joined the WAC, and died in 1943, a hero saving wounded GIs. Her name was in Emily's notebook, a truth James would never admit. Emily clutched it, her resolve hardening. The war had changed her, but her revenge burned brighter. She'd face James soon, his lies no match for her truth. Outside DC's lights glowed, a new America rising. Emily's fight wasn't over, she'd honor the fallen and bury her past. The courtyard of Emily Carter's modest Washington, D.C. home bloomed with late summer roses in 1949, their scent mingling with the city's hum of post-war optimism. Streetcars clattered past and radios blared news of America's economic boom, a stark contrast to the war's shadow lingering in Emily's heart. Inside her small living room was sparse but warm, a government-issued reward for her Women's Army Corps service. A leather notebook lay on her desk filled with names of fallen comrades, its weight a reminder of her wartime vows. Emily, now 38, stood by a window in a simple wool dress, her face etched with lines from sleepless nights. Her reborn memories burned in her past life. James Thornton and Sophia Bennett had betrayed her, leaving her pregnant and disgraced, only to return and cast her out. As she sipped tea, a ragged figure knocked at her door, James broken and begging. James stood on the stoop, a ghost of the dashing heir from 1925. His threadbare coat, patched with mismatched cloth, hung on a skeletal frame. His cheeks sunken, his eyes hollow under a fraying straw hat. "Emily," he rasped, his voice cracked from years of hardship. "I walked from Ohio. I'm sorry." His hands trembled, clutching a tattered newspaper clipping that listed her WAC honors. Emily's heart stirred not with pity, but with a cold satisfaction. In her past life, James had used her, fled with Sophia, and returned in 1945 to accuse her of theft, ensuring her death in disgrace. Now he was a beggar, his pride dust. She gestured to a chair. "Sit," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "Tell me everything." James collapsed into the seat, his story spilling out. He and Sophia had burned through the Thornton funds in Paris, chasing luxury steaks, wine, hotel suites. By 1929, the Depression hit, and Emily's cut-off remittances left them penniless. They scavenged trash bins, slept in alleys, their dreams of progress mocked by hunger. Sophia left me, he lied, his eyes avoiding hers. She got sick tuberculosis and ran off with some foreigner. Emily's lips twitched. She'd met Sophia in 1943 in a muddy field hospital. Sophia had escaped James's abuse, her leg broken by his rage, and joined the WAC, dying a hero saving wounded soldiers. Her name was in Emily's notebook, a truth James would never admit. "You've suffered," Emily said, her tone soft but laced with irony. James leaned forward, his voice pleading. "We were kids together, Emily. You followed me everywhere, said you'd marry me. I liked you too before Sophia. I don't expect you to take me back, just let me stay near. Know you're okay." His words were a performance, the same charm that had fooled her in another life. Emily remembered his cruelty, bedding her while preaching fidelity, abandoning her pregnant and accusing her of infidelity. Now his filth and desperation repulsed her, but kicking him out was too easy. "You can stay nearby," she said, her eyes glinting. "Earn my trust, James. Show me you've changed." His face lit up, a spark of his old arrogance. "I'll do anything," he vowed, scrambling to his feet. Emily's smile was faint, her mind racing. The D.C. streets outside bustled with veterans and bureaucrats rebuilding a nation. She'd raised Thomas James's son, now a bright 8-year-old, as her own, giving him the love James never would. Her war service had earned her respect, but her heart remained scarred, her insomnia a ghost of past betrayals. James's return was a chance to close that wound, not with forgiveness, but justice. She handed him a coin. "Find work, James. Prove yourself." He nodded, clutching it like a lifeline. As he shuffled out, Emily touched her notebook. Sophia's name, a quiet rebuke to his lies. The game was hers, and James would play by her rules. The construction site on DC's outskirts was a chaos of clanging steel and shouting workers in the winter of 1950, the city's skyline rising against a sky heavy with snow. Emily Carter stood at her courtyard home's gate, her wool dress wrapped tight against the cold, watching James Thornton trudge up with a wilted daisy. His frame was frailer than in 1949, his coat patched with burlap, his face scarred by cuts from hauling bricks. "For you," he said, his voice hoarse, offering the flower. Emily took it. Her smile was faint, but her heart was cold. Her reborn memories guided her in her past life. James had betrayed her, leaving her pregnant and disgraced, only to return and destroy her. Now she'd orchestrated his decline, savoring the justice of his suffering. James had found work at the site, carrying bricks for daily pay. Each evening he brought Emily trinkets, daisies, a chipped teacup, a bent spoon. His hands blistered, his body shrinking. He boasted, "I'm stronger than the young ones," wiping sweat from his brow. Emily nodded, her voice soft. "It's hard work, James. You don't have to." He shook his head, eyes bright with desperation. "I'll earn your forgiveness, Emily. I'll stay near you." She hid her satisfaction, the sight of his cuts and exhaustion a balm to her war-scarred heart. She'd begged for his love in her past life, only to be cast out. Now she let him labor his efforts, a mirror of her own past toil. The city pulsed with post-war growth, new factories, GI Bill homes, but Emily's insomnia lingered, eased only by James's daily humiliations. Her doctor, a kind-eyed veteran, noted her improved sleep. "Something's lifting your spirits," he said. Emily didn't confess the truth. Watching James waste away dulled her nightmares. By spring, his cough worsened, his frame skeletal. At a DC hospital, doctors diagnosed tuberculosis, his lungs ravaged by years of filth and labor. "Let him go," they urged, their faces grim. Emily leaned close, whispering, "Live for me, James." His eyes, clouded with pain, pleaded for release, but she refused, her voice a velvet blade. In her past life, he'd let her die in disgrace. Now she'd prolong his torment. A stray dog scavenging the hospital ward bit James's tongue during a fevered night, silencing his cries. He slipped in and out of death, each recovery a fresh agony. Emily visited daily, and her presence was a quiet torture. By February 1950, he died, his body left in an alley per her instructions, a final echo of her past life abandonment. She stood in her courtyard snow, dusting her dress, and felt a weight lift. Her nightmares faded, her sleep deep for the first time in years. Thomas, now 9, ran to her, his laugh bright. She'd raised him with love, shielding him from his father's sins. Her notebook of fallen heroes, including Sophia's name, sat on her desk, a testament to her war service, and her vow to honor them. DC's lights glowed beyond her gate, a nation rebuilt on sacrifice. Emily's revenge was complete, not just against James, but against the past that had broken her. She'd saved the household, fought for her country, and forged a new life. Thomas tugged her hand, pointing to the stars. "What's next, Mama?" he asked. Emily smiled, her heart steady. "Whatever we make of it," she said. "The future, like America's, was hers to shape."